Yes, Mr. Chairman. Otto Avery,
Here.
Osvaldo Lara, Guillermo Cavazos. Here. Javier Compián, Richard Perales,
Here.
Luis Laval,
Here.
Javier Martinez,
Present.
Jose Gonzalez, Richard Norton.
Here.
For the record, Mr. Chairman, you do have quorum.
Thank you very much. For the record here, we're receiving an email from Mr. Gonzalez asking to be excused. So I need a motion on that.
I move that we excuse
A
me.
motion to approve Mr. Gonzalez's, he had a business meeting in San Antonio, so we'll go ahead and excuse him. All right. Moving on to the first item, let me see. Do we have anything from the past that we need to bring up?
Just the minutes from the February 13th
Okay, I
meeting.
need a motion to approve the minutes.
Where are they?
They're in there. Give me a few minutes to read over them.
I move we approve the minutes as written.
I have a motion to approve the,
Second.
a motion and a second to approve the minutes as presented. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to our first item, we have a request submitted by Robert D. Achar to authorize an exception to the literal interpretation of the Laredo Code of Ordinance, Section 28-38E, entitled Permitted Sign Dimension Off-Premise Signs by granting a variance to the minimum spacing between off-premise signs requirement of Lot 8A, Block 1, River Hill Commercial, located at 4160 US Highway 83, South Zapata Highway. Before we go into that, I was reading over what we have coming up, and it seems to me like we have a couple of these items dealing with signs. Is there anybody here from legal?
No, sir.
No?
No, sir.
Okay, to the board, here, to the board. We've had an issue come up here before, and I don't know if anybody was, some of you were on the board at that time, where we had an issue come up regarding signs. And I, for one, am not certain that this board is authorized to make decisions when it comes to, I think what we're talking about here, the Laredo Code of Ordinance. Now, last time, it was brought to us, and what we discussed was the placing of the sign, moving it was in a setback, and it had needed to move forward a little bit, but the request was setback related. It wasn't necessarily ordinance related. So before we move on into this thing, I just wanted to make certain that we're all comfortable with this, because I for one am not. I am not comfortable making a decision to grant a variance on something that I'm not certain that we have the authority to grant the variance on.
Mr. Chairman, just Vanessa Guerra, first of all, from your planning staff. I wanted to bring to your attention a section from the Code of Ordinances where it does state.
Could you get that focus a little bit?
You've got it in front of you.
It's out of focus.
You've got it in front of you.
Oh, it's in there?
It's in there. It's in your packet.
Oh, here it is.
Where is it?
Page, Exhibit B.
Here we go.
Exhibit B.
Yeah, it's listed as Exhibit B, sir. Did you see it? Have you gotten there
Looking
yet?
for it, yeah.
And I wanted to call your attention to the second sentence. A variance may be granted, and this is directly out of the Code of Ordinances on the section for signage. And it does stipulate that a variance may be granted by the Board of Adjustments where the literal application of the code would create a particular hardship for the sign user, and the following criteria are met. So what it's telling us, first of all, is that there must exist a hardship, but they also have to meet these succeeding criteria. Number one, a literal application of the code would not allow the property to be used at its highest and best use as zoned. And of course, variances cannot be granted for unplatted property. The granting of the requested variance would not be materially detrimental to the property owners in the vicinity, and a hardship arising for the sign user under the literal interpretation of the code due to unusual conditions, visual impairment, or other unique conditions to the property not caused by the property owner that do not apply generally to the city. So these are, you were concerned about whether the Board of Adjustment can grant a variance. The code does
Okay,
speak to that.
I'll accept that, but it's not something that we have tackled before. And, you know, I would think that we need to be well-versed before we make a decision here. So, is there anybody here to discuss this? Anybody here?
Well, I think that the last time we did it was because it was, the sign was within a setback. City
Right.
setback.
That-
I don't think this is gonna be within a city setback. This is just a variance for the dimensional sizes or whatever.
Distance
But that one
requirements.
was in a setback, and I think that's why.
The last one dealt with a setback.
Setback, this one doesn't.
This will be for distance, a
It's
distance,
just strictly distance.
it's a distance requirement.
Okay, sir, go ahead.
Sure, do you have an extra copy of
Robert,
this?
here, I'll put.
You know,
I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So move.
I have a
Second.
motion and a second to open the public hearing. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, Mr. Char, floor is yours.
My name's Robert Char. I can zoom in. Zoom out there. So my name's Robert Hachar, and about a year ago, the sign regulations, we came under a new sign ordinance. The sign ordinance at the state, the requirements at the state level were literally 6 times less stringent than the requirements at the city level. And the city relaxed the ordinance somewhat on primary highways and federal state highways. The current reg is that you can only locate a sign within, well, greater than 1,000 feet from another sign. And my permit has been granted at the state level, but not at the city level over what the city says is 15 feet. The footprint on a sign is much greater than 15 feet. It would depend on where you measured from the sign. I mean, that's how close it is from one sign to another. So what I'm asking for is if it is literally correctly 15 feet out of 1,000 feet, it's 1.5% of the variance is what I'm asking for. I'm not asking for a larger sign. I'm not asking to be in the setback or the right-of-way or anything like that. It is what Horacio, during his tenure, considered a very insignificant distance. What happens on this roadway is that I do feel that I meet all of the criteria if you want me to run through that and give you that detail. But I don't want you to think it's 100 feet or 200 feet. I mean, this is just a hair. And it would depend if you measured from a light, a pole, the edge of the sign. I mean, that's not really talked about in the ordinance. It is at TxDOT. And TxDOT has some really strict requirements, as if we drop the head, we take from that edge, and we have to be a certain distance from the right-of-way. The city ordinance just says 1,000 feet between signs, but they don't say where you measure from, but TxDOT does. And I've met the TxDOT requirement, and I have my TxDOT permit.
Excuse me, did you say that you had already got approval from the state?
Yes.
Where-
The applications is on your packet.
It's in there.
It's in here?
Keep on going.
This is nice.
After that.
I'm sorry.
I don't know how
Just
to
for clarification, the request is, the distance requirement is 1,000 feet between signs. And we have representatives from the building department to explain the measurement of the signs and how the code requires us to measure. So the variance request is for a 25-foot variance to the distance requirement. And I think what he's showing you is the permit application. You probably need to rotate it a bit. The TxDOT permit application.
This is the response from the city
Might want to,
on.
Rotate
on
it.
that. Okay, this is the response from the city. It's not 25, it's between 20 and 15, because this came from the city. I didn't say it's 25.
we don't, I
What the
can't
city
see what
told
that
me
is.
is,
What is that?
this is,
You said it?
the distance between that and 1,000 is 15 to 20. Or is that? Oh,
This was a map that was given to us from the building department, and it's also attached in your packet. And they say approximately 975 feet.
So this is my correspondence with the city that says 980 to 985.
And this is what was given to us from the building department. Based on-
So the question being right now,
They could have measured from this light, the extremity, and if you measure from this light, it makes it. And if there's no,
but in any case, we're looking at either a variance of 25 feet or
15
a
feet.
variance of
15.
15 feet.
Depending on where you measure from, because the footprint is much wider than 15 feet. But it looks like, from what I just saw, they measured from the light, which makes it.
Oh, we're in, go ahead. Ms.
I have a question, Mr. Achar. Why can we not achieve 1,000 feet? Is there a limit?
Well, I didn't write the red.
No, I'm asking
Can
why,
you move?
why it can't be moved to 1,000 feet away.
Oh, because that's another piece of property.
Okay, so basically you're,
Yeah, so in my opinion, the highest and best use for that property, I mean, it generates 15,000 a month. So the highest and best use is based, if you take an appraisal class, it's on money. And in these particular circumstances, they didn't say measure from the light or measure from the other one. The highest and best use would be that the amount of revenue they need to get from
but basically where you have it, the proposed location is as far away as you can get from the sign as possible on your property, right?
If not, I would have to go to another parcel of property.
Go ahead.
Roland Lozano for the record from Building Department. One of the things I wanted to point out, the city ordinance, you must get a city permit before you can get a TxDOT permit. That's one of the things that's stipulated. So, he's still trying to, the fact that he's saying that he has a TxDOT permit, it's not really an approval. It's really just they're applying for it, if it complies. But, and the other thing I would want to say, besides the three, what Ms. Guerra pointed out, that the three other criterias, is that by granting a variance, this is kind of, you're basically telling the state, doesn't matter that you have 1,000 feet, the city's saying, okay. So it kind of goes down the path, like, I realize that it's a small amount of variance that Mr. Achar is requesting. However, we're basically forcing the state saying, it doesn't matter what your 1,000 feet requirement is, you know. It's
The 1,000,
it's also a TxDOT requirement of 1,000 feet.
it's a
not just-
TxDOT requirement of 1,000 feet?
No, it's not.
Where the
That
text,
is wrong.
well, here on the application, where,
That is wrong. The TxDOT requirement is 300 feet, independent of the other side of the roadway. it is 1,500 on the federally.
Well, that's only on the
regulated
digital side.
On the digital side, it's 1,500, and you meet both city and state requirements.
I think the point of it is that they do need to meet the city's requirements. That the TechStop requirements for granting of their permit is dependent on them meeting the city's requirements. So the state is saying, you city, we're not going to abrogate your authority to regulate signs within your jurisdiction, and we will, because TechStop is a state
But
entity, so they have
even
to.
if we were to grant a variance of whether it be 15 or 25 feet, the fact remains that
What would TechStop do?
what, TxDOT still has to grant a permit.
That's correct, and it would be completely up to
And
them.
they could reject it, in which case,
That's
everything would be thrown out.
That's correct.
TxDOT, unlike what you've heard here, all I do is deal with TxDOT. This gentleman has a lot of duties. This is all I do for a living. TxDOT rule is 300 feet. The city rule is 3 times stiffer than TxDOT rule. I have been granted a TxDOT permit. TxDOT says, independent of what we do, you have to go get your city permit. It's not one linked to the other. It is, I either comply, or I'm gonna get fined by the city, or I'm gonna get fined by TxDOT. They are mutually exclusive, and I have to come under both rules and meet both rules. So what has been said about 1,000 foot at the TxDOT level is not correct.
Well, I mean,
But I don't
I
think
think,
that's even regulated.
I don't think we have the rules in front of us, so I'm not gonna go based on your word or based on his
All I
word
can tell you is
until
I
we
have-
can see it.
I have my approved TxDOT permit here with me.
You're what, that you already have the permit?
Yes.
From TxDOT.
But I cannot put up a sign unless I,
But does that show,
The code requires that our permit be issued first, right there.
that's not what TxDOT requires.
But
so
it's our
TxDOT
code.
ignores that.
It's the
But
city
if you're gonna
code.
comply with the city and also the city says that you must comply with the city first. So this is city ordinance, right? So, and let me zoom out a little bit so I could kind of get everything. So basically, the applicant, where does it say?
It should be the first sentence. A city of Laredo permit must be,
Yes.
I can't- you
So
gotta
it's right here.
zoom
A
out.
city of Laredo permit is required to apply for a permit with the state of.
The state
No, it's the
wouldn't
first
give me the
sentence.
permit. That's what the city is saying. The state does not say that. They wouldn't
Correct,
give
the
me
state
the
does not
permit.
say that, but it
So-
does say you must comply with the city. And the city says you have to first, and this is not something that Mr. Char didn't know.
I
'cause
don't know,
he was at the
I'd like to hear
workshop.
from somebody else on the board here, what do y'all think?
I mean, you're doing cart before the horse, both of
I
you.
think in essence, the state has already said they'll approve the permit subject to the city approval.
Correct.
You can't
That's
tell
right
me
there.
not to apply to the state if it's my right to apply to the state. There's a reason why I do that. So the city can say, yes, you need this first before you apply for the state. Well, of course, the sign operator is gonna apply at the state first. I'm not doing anything wrong, and I don't have to go back to the state. But I'm gonna get any permit that I can get in order to hold the space. But that is not even the point here.
What I'm seeing on this paper here that you showed us a moment ago, the permit application, I'm not seeing where there was a permit granted. You're saying that it's already been granted? It says
This is
permit
the-
application.
This is the permit number right here,
Thanks.
P1800203 for that specific site.
Is that, is
On the
that,
third sheet, it says approval.
Yeah.
so that is approved?
Based on the information that we have, the third sheet,
Okay.
But if, on the second page of that same application, if you look at the very bottom, or it says by submitting the application, the second bullet point, it stipulates that by issuance of a permit, TxDOT does not represent that the sign or location thereof meets city, county, and/or local government laws, orders, ordinances, or other regulations. By issuing the permit,
But
a
that's-
contract does not.
But that's
you
why
know,
he's here.
That's why,
That's
that's why I'm
correct.
here.
But
See.
he's saying, that we should grant it based on conditional,
Based on text
yeah.
No, I didn't say
No,
that.
he didn't say
I
that.
said you should grant it based on your criteria, which is highlighted in red, and that's why I said you want me to go through that criteria. I never connected that directly to.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry, I misheard you
That's
then.
why I said leave that up here.
Sure.
And he gave it to me, because that's your criteria. The
Yes,
state has their criteria, I have met that criteria.
I just wanted to make
Well,
that
it's kind of funny
clear,
that the state,
that
and
this
city's
application
criteria
doesn't.
would not match.
Oh, that happens all the time?
Pancho.
Go ahead.
All the time?
What?
Yeah, not, maybe not with signs,
Pancho,
plastic
how many
bags,
cities are there
all
in
sorts of
Texas?
stuff.
How can TxDOT
Match all
completely match
cities.
every city?
I agree.
It would be impossible to match, because they'd have to go to every city in Texas and say, well, let's make sure that yours matches with ours. When the state says it's.
Do we have
up to
any
the
other
city-
questions?
Yeah, is there any hardship arising from the sign, literal interpretation? I mean, is there hardship for the property owner? I mean, there's three criteria that you based it on.
Right.
Literal application of the code, which
So-
it's the best,
In
Use
my
of the
opinion,
land.
it's the highest and best use.
right, no, I understand,
Okay.
would not materially
The
be detrimental
granting
to the
of the,
property owner. Is the property owner here
well,
complaining?
it's a very commercial area.
Okay,
Is it
But
detrimental?
it
Is what
may
we want?
prevent the, the surrounding property owner from being able to do, to use his property and meet the requirements. By granting of this variance, it may then remove the ability of the property owner in the vicinity who does meet the distance requirements from being able to
But
use the
that-
property
that's-
for its.
But you're putting yourself in the property owner's mind.
Well,
He's
that's-
not here saying
Well,
you're,
that's all we can do is say, could it, would it, would it? Would the granting of the variance be a material detrimental to the property owners in the vicinity?
some
could be.
some property owners think that having a sign is detrimental. So you can't judge that unless he was here and say, well, in my opinion, it does.
I mean, I think you can judge things without having to have the property owner. I mean, I can judge that, having, maybe a welding shop right next to my residence may be
Okay,
detrimental.
okay,
And I
so-
don't have to,
Okay, so the neighbor is Danny's,
Mhm.
correct? The neighbor is Danny's.
Restaurant?
Yes.
Okay.
Danny's is in this for profit. Danny's has not applied for his permit or been here saying this is gonna negatively affect me because he may think, well, that's gonna
Mm-hmm. Maybe he's not,
detract from my
maybe he's not
restaurant.
aware. I mean,
okay, this is, getting out of hand, because you guys are arguing over silly things, because you don't know what Danny's is
You don't know what he's
applying for.
thinking. I mean,
The
he's not
application is
here.
applied
but
to.
it
do you wanna-
doesn't, it's not dependent
or
on
no?
it being Danny's.
It's not
It's
what Danny's
dependent
gonna
on,
do or not do.
any
The
property.
statute says hardship for the sign user.
Yeah, sign user, and I don't see,
Yeah, it's hardship for the sign
just-
user, it's not
bottom
hardship
line-
for somebody else.
in my opinion, it's whether you all think 15 feet is outrageously,
And it's where
Close.
is the 15 feet?
I think it's close.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's-
you've done worse, and we've done, you're
Well,
talking 1%
Are
of
there,
the.
before we discuss it amongst ourselves, is there any other questions that have to come before Mr. Tart?
I don't wanna open up a can of worms, but what's the logic behind the 1,000 feet separation? What's the?
That's a city.
It's a city
Right, but-
requirement.
Why
And how do you come up with that measurement?
How is that determined?
There was I want to say, a year-long with at least, 6 months of workshops every 2 weeks. Mr. Char was present at, I would say, most of them. And in defining what a sign is, what the use was, and why the distance is. It used to be 1,500, they lowered it to 1,000. And what I can tell you, and this is why Planning Department asked me to speak, I was present at these. And really, it's just a question of how to regulate the signs, right? And this was an expert in signs. And he came and they were okay with it, with how it was approved.
This is an
Now,
arbitrary,
But why?
it's arbitrary.
Can I-
It was not anything else, because this happened when I was on planning and zoning 3 years ago.
Can I,
And it was on the committee,
Can I respond to
and
that?
it just,
Because, again,
1,000 feet just came out.
Again,
1,000 feet,
that was,
15,800
I take these rules literally, that was incorrect. I'm in the sign business, and we are allowed to be larger, and we are allowed to do certain things that other people cannot do because Lady Bird Johnson, during her tenure, said, we're gonna have a Highway Beautification Act. I'm allowed to do certain things on my sign that others are not. I'm allowed to be larger, but much less frequent. And that's the way the state controls me, and the cities kind of went along with that. So that is the reason there are distance regulations, because you don't want a sign every 5 feet along the roadway.
So it's aesthetics.
Well, it's not that. So as you're driving and you're looking at a sign and there's one right next to it, your eyes are off the road for longer periods of time. And for a while there, I think the city wasn't allowing electronic signs, because people would stare, as you're driving, would stare at the sign to see what the next ad is, but now they allow it. But that's what the distance requirement is.
Some people would say that in the electronic era, it could be distracting. Those rules are very difficult, more difficult than what I'm talking about. So we're in a very regulated business, and I've just, the state lets me fudge by 25 feet. But in the city, when they're more stringent, they say, well, you got 15 to 20 feet, now I hear 25, but the pad is 25. So where are they measuring from? That's why you heard 25 right now, because they measured from the light, which is the,
But in any case, but we understand what you're saying, but in any case, we're either talking about a variance is necessary to either be
5 feet, 10 feet,
15 feet or 25 feet.
Yes, yes.
Either way.
Well-
Either way, so it doesn't make a difference where they're measuring it from. Either way, it's less than 1,000.
if you would have measured from the other light pole, I wouldn't be here.
Oh, really?
Yes, because the pad is 25 feet.
So what do you measure from?
It's from edge of the sign to edge of the sign, but basically, let me try to.
Edge of the sign is the pole
So-
or the sign?
This section up here where the parking lot is, that would be the other property. That is, so you can see he's basically trying to put it as far away as possible to try to meet the 1,000 feet, right? So he just can't achieve it, and we don't have the, oh, it's 15 feet, let me go ahead and grant you the permit. We don't have that authority, right?
We
That's why it comes here.
understand.
So, in order for him to achieve it, he would literally have to put it in the other property, that's.
No, but my question to you is, what is used to measure?
Is measured
Is
from
it
the sign.
the corner of the sign, the middle of the sign?
They're using the.
Yes, ma'am.
They're using the, Annabelle Ramirez, they're using
Go
pictometry.
ahead, go ahead.
They're using what?
Pictometry,
What?
that's what they're using. So they're not actually
They're
at the
using
site
what, ma'am?
They're
measuring.
using what?
One more time?
Pictometry is an app on our computer, and you can measure from from our maps.
Well, I think Mr. Abel's question was a little different. The
Yeah.
state measures it one way, how does the city measure?
From sign to sign.
Based on the
Not-
pictures?
Yes,
Okay.
we go
So-
through the computer, we're not actually at the site.
Would it be wise for the
And
city
what
to
he's saying,
adopt?
he's right. That pad that he's saying, that could add a difference in size.
Well, are we
And
just
I'm from the
lacking
city-
good
I'm-
rules
I'm-
about where to measure from, maybe? Maybe we should adopt the rules that the state has or something about where
Back
we
in the
measure
day,
from?
about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when I had, I just got it back.
My question is, if this is the width of the sign right
Yes,
here,
sir.
this is the middle of the sign, are we measuring it from here? If the pad, do we measure it from this side of the pad? If we're going this way, the 1,000 feet going this way, we measure it from here, here, or here?
Okay. If we were there, actually at the site, and this is what you're talking about. Okay, what we would do is measure from the outside of the sign, this is how it's supposed to be. The outside of the sign to the inside of the other sign. That would be on center. But as we don't go out there, we just measure from where the little square says to the
From the
other
middle,
side.
from the middle of the point to the middle of the
Well,
point?
wouldn't it be from the center point of the pole to the center point of
That's
the
what I
next
thought.
pole?
That should be done.
This is the footprint.
Okay.
I heard 20 to 15, and I just saw a map for the first time that says 25. And I can tell you that that was from the light pole, which extends further from the sign to illuminate the face.
So is
Why
that
don't you
from the
measure from the other light pole and I'll make it? I think the question is a 1 to 2%, all the way to 25, difference significant enough? Do I meet the criteria to be granted a variance?
I think what we're talking here is, yes, we understand that there's gonna be a variance needed either way, whether it be 15 or 25.
I personally think if you had gone to
No,
the
no,
other line, you
I
might-
understand their rules are 1,000. Their rules,
Right.
the city rules state 1,000. Whatever TxDOT does, that's different. When it's not,
That's right.
we're not interested in that right now. But my question to them is, are we arguing over something that we really should not be arguing over? Because maybe the unit of measure, where we're measuring from, maybe you are in compliance. Either way, in my opinion, and right now we'll discuss it after the public hearing, but in my opinion, honestly, we're looking at such a small amount that it could be that if it was measured a different way, it would be in compliance. So that having said that, are there any other questions for Robert, Mr. Char? No, I need a motion to close the public hearing. I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. Now, having said that, what do we want to do here? In all honesty, I am not comfortable with everything the city has thrown at us about the signs, but having versed ourselves in the last half an hour on what this particular issue is, I think it's very clear.
I move we approve the variance. I move we approve the variance. If it is
I have a
not,
motion.
if it does not exceed 25 feet.
Right.
I mean, we're gonna give them a variance for 25 feet, but if the city goes out there and says, whoa, wait a second, you know, it's 125 feet.
I second
Well,
that. It seems to me
Mr. Chair.
that,
But wait, hang on. That's your motion.
My motion is to
Did you
approve the variance.
He'll second that motion.
25.
Now,
25
under
feet.
discussion.
Chair, as far as discussion, if you look at the definitions on what were the permitted sign dimensions, and you look at the 1,000 feet along and across the corridor, you look at the next one, it says 200 feet, radial feet measured from sign pole to sign pole. Well, here we have a measurement sign pole to sign pole, yet on A, we just have measured along and across. Well, maybe we need to insert some language in there to be clear that it should be from sign pole to sign pole, because now you start talking about the edge of the sign or the light pole or other things. It really should be the sign pole to the sign pole. I mean, we
Well,
just don't have it in there.
but where in the sign pole to where in the sign?
Midpoint.
Midpoint of the
You're talking
pole. If the pole is 18 inches wide, it's the midpoint of those 18 inches. The midpoint of the pole to the midpoint of the next pole.
That would be my thought.
That would be
to
logical.
change that wording in the city.
Well, you know that they don't have it in there.
Yeah, I know, but we should
Yeah.
tell them to change it.
And I think when you start talking about differing measurements, well, it does create some confusion. So,
Well, no, that's the reason
The reason
that we're here, because what has come up here is if we look at the way it's measured, it's not real clear. If it was clear, then it may be in compliance. So anyway, I'm gonna call the question, call the motion. I have a motion and a second to approve the variance request not to exceed 25 feet.
And if you want to add measured from
well,
pole to
I
pole.
don't know that we have the right to amend the ordinance on our
I'm not
own,
amending it, I'm just saying.
but, to
No,
interpret
not
it.
amending.
But we're not amending it.
No, no, no,
All
but
we're
what it
doing
says
is
there.
approving
The variance.
the variance,
Right.
based on that.
That's
Okay,
correct.
does everybody understand the question that's been come up? All right, the motion is to approve the variance not to exceed 25 from center pole to center pole.
That's correct.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion,
I'm abstaining, Mr. Chair.
right. Let the record reflect that Mr. LeBeau abstains. All right, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I was gonna ask you to abstain. I was gonna ask you to abstain anyway.
Thank you.
Now, that would I do.
All right, second item on the agenda.
Mr. Chairman, BOA, case number 13.
Pardon?
Will be tabled.
Number
The next case will be tabled.
Number B is tabled.
BOA 13 will be tabled. Your next
Okay.
item.
And to be brought up again later. Who's making the motion to table that?
Was that
Yes,
tabled
which is B,
by staff or
was tabled by
by the
staff.
applicant?
by
or-
staff.
So-
And we advise the applicant.
Okay, all right.
Okay, so the next two of them are,
I'm sorry?
it's, which one did you just tell me?
13,
BOA case 13.
13-2019.
second item in your packet
Second item.
The second item,
Okay, so the third item coming up,
is 14.
BOA case 14.
14 was this one.
14, 2019 Laredo Outlet Shoppers.
BOA 13.
14,
14.
the Laredo Outlet Shoppers.
Okay, BOA 14.
Outlet shops.
Request submitted by Laredo Outlet Shoppers to authorize an exception to the literal interpretation of Laredo Code of Ordinance, Section 28-38B, entitled Permitted Sign Dimensions, attached by granting a variance to the minimum square footage requirement of the total wall area facing a public or private street, whichever is greater, located at 1600 Water Street, Laredo Outlet Shoppers. Is there anybody here to speak on the behalf?
Thank you, Board. Dan Davia, I'm the General Manager with the Outlet Shops.
All right, so what do we have here?
All right, I'm sorry. We are looking for a variance in the signage package for our property. We have 3 buildings facing Water Street, and presently they're blank walls. They had previously been colored blotches on each of the buildings. I don't know if you're familiar with the shops, but what we've done is painted over those, and they're all now blank face. And what we would like to do is put signage, branding on the walls, similar to about 90% of other outlet malls. Put the particular shops that will hopefully increase awareness and sales in the area on those surfaces. My understanding is that we have, thank you so much. We're allowed 5%, I understand, of the faces of those buildings, and we're looking at approximately 28%.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the ordinance requires that the signage be limited to 5% of the total wall area facing a public or private street. And of course, whichever is greater, I think it says, whichever is greater. And we had requested the square footage of the wall area. The applicant did give us the wall area for the south-facing facade. However, we would need the wall areas for the buildings facing east and west and the north-facing facade in order to give accurate calculations of what would be the 5% of the total. In most cases, most buildings face possibly one or possibly 2 streets, but in this case, it faces 4 streets. So we need a little bit more information to give accurate calculations on the square footage of what exactly we may be in a situation where they may be in compliance. So that we asked for some more information yesterday. They were able to give us some dimensions, but again, it was still only the south-facing wall. So we have the
So
applicant here.
these signs right there face, what is the parking lot below that?
It's the south.
Laredo.
It's
That's south.
to the river.
That's Water Street right there.
Front faces Mexico.
This would be lighted or signs or just the sign?
No,
They're
sir.
painted on.
They're considered wall signs. They're going to be painted on.
Is this a rendering? This is not there yet.
That's a rendering,
That's the rendering.
So, question to staff.
yes.
Does a parking lot, or is there a public or private street in there?
Yes.
There's a street that, runs along the river.
In between the
Water
park,
Street.
the parking area, right?
That's correct.
Pedregal.
No, it's in between the outlet and the shop. There's a street.
Yeah, okay,
between those two.
that's one.
That's-
And then there probably would be another one
Farther
south
down.
of the parking lot. right?
Zaragoza is north, and then east.
Water,
Water
water, and then.
Pedregal.
So is our question that we're contemplating here, whether the amount of signage that is put up there exceeds the 5%? Is that our question?
That could be. It could be, we're just not quite sure at this at this point, because we don't have accurate, dimensions of all the walls
Well,
facing a street.
I have a question. When you say four walls, I look at, for example, the picture that we have before us, and it's like Old Navy. Well, Old Navy's interior walls will face the interior of that mall. They're not gonna be facing the streets.
And that's why, well, I was thinking the three streets,
So that's you.
Well,
the
yeah,
Zaragoza, the
facing
side
Zaragoza.
streets.
but so how do you apply the side streets to all the tenants?
No, it's just the building itself.
Right, but
We're not, I don't think that they're advertising a particular shop. It's just gonna be a sort of all on one.
so your
scattered.
idea is to take the wall area of the south wall, the north wall,
And
the
the
east
side.
wall, and the west wall,
Yes.
determine what 5% of that is, and say, there's your 5%, you get one wall somewhere or something?
Wherever you wanna put your signage, you get 5% of that. And that's what the code tells me.
And how do you determine the size of those signs? Like where you see that Old Navy, it's just a round thing, do you determine the shape of the
We're
size of
talking
the?
about the wall.
But see, then, since
You're
the
just
fact,
talking the whole wall
The whole
that's painted
wall.
on.
since the fact that we have
They've given us some dimensions.
we have
of each of
signage
the-
on the end over there where it says Nike,
Yeah.
I guess that becomes now part of the sign, am I correct? And then
Yeah.
that would be, then the same would happen on the next sign over, the red, because since it did exist on Nike, where the Nike is, go to the left, right below where it says outlet, that red area right there would also be considered part of the sign. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so then,
They've given us some dimensions of each of those logos.
Yeah, but you're going from 5% to almost 30?
28%.
Well, 28% because they're only taking this
The
side,
this,
area, not the other area. So
Right.
let's say if you have the same area on the other side, you're already saying 14, and plus the side streets. That's
But
what
they don't have the, they don't have
They
the
haven't
area.
provided that, yeah.
Yeah, but they
I
don't
guess
have
I
the
haven't
area
driven
on the
down there
side.
lately. Is there signage on the opposite side of that, the north side?
No, they
No,
don't
not
even put
now.
it there.
Not now.
there is no sign, the only signage currently
but there's
existing
no
is
wall
the
to
sign
paint.
that says outlet
So the only
shops.
thing that we should be contemplating is that what we're looking at right there?
That's what
And
they're
that
asking
total
for.
square footage is what?
They have said you wanna go?
No.
It's 45,000, that's what they're telling us. It's for the south-facing facade for those two buildings. They're identified as building 5 and 4, they're saying it's 45,000 square feet. They haven't given us really any dimensions, height or
Well,
length.
and I'm sorry, but it would seem to me that before something like this comes up to us, that we would have the facts of, if we're gonna figure something out on 5% on the amount of square footage, that we would know what the dimensions are. And, I'm not one to say, let's guess and figure out, or take somebody's word for it. We have to have actual facts.
That's correct, sir.
And I-
So,
I'm assuming you're talking about wall space.
Yes,
because You
sir.
can't count the
Yeah.
other side, because the other side is no walls. You can't paint anything on the other side.
Yes, you can on the Zaragoza side,
On the Zaragoza side, there's no wall space.
but you could.
There's
It's
no
it's
walls.
equivalent
It's a
to
wall.
that side, sir.
It's the same wall.
Yes,
It's the same as that?
Yes.
Do you have a picture of the north side?
you know.
I suggest we wait until we get,
Yeah.
all the final numbers and
see,
all the
my,
information in front of us.
I would be the one to say, I think we need to wait until we get more information. But the information we need is, A, is the north side a sign? Is it considered a sign?
Well,
If it is not considered a sign, then we're only dealing with the square footage of the south side. If we're dealing with the south side, then we need to get measurements. What is length and width, height, the whole thing, to where we come up with square footage.
There we go.
This is the Zaragoza side.
Can you
see how-
point to it, please?
Yes,
Okay,
Zaragoza.
there you go.
And it's approximately, just what I measured, and this is 623 feet, approximately.
And approximately 44 feet high.
That's one building.
5,000 square feet.
That's Zaragoza Street,
yes.
Here's Santa
driving,
So that faces Mexico.
driving east.
Zaragoza does
Faces
not.
north.
Oh, that
This
faces,
is
that's the
Zaragoza.
north
That's
facing wall.
facing north,
This
yes,
is
sir.
Zaragoza.
Santa Maria is where his right
Here's,
finger
here's
is.
Santa Maria. Here's the walkway. This is the second building. And it is a distance of approximately
Well,
530
so,
feet.
are we supposed to take into account if they're trying to do a sign on the south facing Mexico? Do we take into account the north side wall? Because that doesn't seem to be what the ordinance
Doesn't
says.
seem
It
fair.
The code says simply,
says total wall.
the maximum of not more than 5% of the total wall area facing a public or private street, whichever is greater.
I know,
Well, okay,
but
but you're
face-
trying to get a more wall in there by using the north side and saying, there's a wall over there, but we're not gonna use that wall, we're gonna put it all on the south side. Well, that wall wouldn't even come into play.
That's,
Should it?
that's my point.
I mean, I don't think that measurement should even be included.
Well, I guess that is what the Board of Adjustment.
I mean, that doesn't make,
If
that
you
doesn't
feel-
make what this whole thing
I'm
is.
not opposed to the signage myself.
Yes.
I mean,
So my understanding is 45,000 square feet is for the south-facing buildings
Right.
and how much signage do you have?
with,
Gonna be
with the,
45,000?
based on the rendering there.
But we're not, there's no signage right now on the north side.
No.
Correct.
You have,
Or the south side.
Correct.
on the back of the package, you have a photograph which shows the outlet mall.
Yes.
On the,
and
last
buildings,
okay.
and that's what they currently look like right now.
Yeah.
Okay, now, have we done this with anybody else where they've done these wall signs? Are we, again, I'm curious of what does the total wall area mean? Does it mean that wall? Or you get to look at all the walls and say, that's where you determine it? That
Well-
sounds kind of like,
Well, no- well, see, normally,
Doesn't
I mean,
sound right.
buildings face just one street.
right.
You know, this is kind of unique in that it's by itself. It faces a bunch of walls.
Okay,
would-
but
Bunch of
there's
streets.
only one wall that they want to put advertising on.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
but that wouldn't
So there's only
limit
one
them.
wall that should be measured and it's that wall.
But
It
it's
would
not-
seem
it's
to
not-
me-
The code doesn't limit them to, it doesn't say only for the wall.
Right,
Well, it
but-
says
upon
facing,
which-
but-
facing
okay.
a public street, which
Here,
is the advertising we're talking
It
about.
would seem to me that the sign, the street that we're talking about is the street where the sign is facing.
Correct.
So if you're talking about facing a public or private street, it would seem to me the street that is in front of the sign.
Right.
Not a street that's back over there on the other side facing another wall. I mean, that to me is common sense. That's what I would do, but I still don't think that we're there to be able to make a decision without the facts. We still need,
East and west.
But if that's the interpretation that the board wishes to
it's
pursue,
28%.
Well, I
then
mean-
we do have those calculations. We do
it's-
have
it's not-
the area.
It's not an interpretation that there's no guidance. We have no guidance from city to tell us which street we're talking about. To me, that's logical, what we're talking about. But if you want to get us some guidance, we're gonna wait anyway, because we're gonna look, I don't want to proceed with this until we get actual measurements. What is the length? What is the height? To where we can come up with square footage. If we are gonna make a decision based on that particular wall and what is 5%, we need to know how much is already in signage and what the total is. That if it meets the 5%,
And
it's there.
if we will not consider any of the other walls, only the wall facing the walls facing south,
Yeah.
where the signs will be placed, then the applicant has told us that it's 45,000 square feet of wall area, and the calculations are included in your packet. The calculations are, It's,
45 times 5%, you're talking about 22.
he's asking for 12,525 square feet of signage. The 5% of the 45,000
So he's
would
at-
be
where- he's in
2,000.
excess.
Where do you get 4,500?
No, not 4,000.
45,000.
Oh, that's the total size of the wall, right?
Yeah, the total
Okay.
wall area.
And then the total
Only
advertising?
that one.
5% of 45,000 is 2,250.
And so this goes over, this,
Yeah.
the proposal goes way over then?
Yeah, they're asking for 12,525 square feet.
Or 23% more.
Yes.
No, but they're
Exactly.
asking for 12,525 square feet when you take into account all the walls,
Yes.
right?
That's,
No.
No,
That's
just
the
that one
difference.
wall.
That's just a
That's
south-facing
just the
wall.
south-facing wall.
And how do you say from the south-facing wall, you're only using 12,525 when the whole thing's advertised up?
You just
Well,
measure
each sign
individual
is
sign.
measured, each.
Sorry?
You just measure
each
individual
one.
signs.
Old Navy
Yeah.
is measured 15
Individual signs.
Yeah,
by 30.
Each
Well,
sign is
I asked that question a while ago, we're measuring each logo there, or how
Yeah,
are
they're,
you?
they're right here in the packet.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Your company, do they have other buildings where these kind of signages are on the walls of
We
their
do,
buildings?
yes. Matter of fact, most of them are four-sided with signage.
And this is part of the marketing strategy of these types of malls to put this type of advertising?
Yes, sir.
on
It's to increase sales, awareness. It's a
Right.
branding, and marketing thing.
Okay,
That's what it's designed for, to increase sales. That's why we're doing this.
yes, sir.
So you're asking for a variance based on what?
Based on the south-facing walls, is my understanding. Now, take this in mind, that the guy that was supposed to do the presentation is in Atlanta today. But the measurements that we received are for the south-facing buildings. That does not mean that, I know the discussion was at some time, we may want to do north side.
Uh-huh.
No, but referring back to my question, I understand that we're only discussing one wall. I think we're all in agreement now, we're discussing one wall, and it was 45,000 square feet, and we're looking at, you're asking for 28%.
Yes, sir.
Which is over, 23% over what is allowed.
Correct.
So the request is coming to us based on what criteria? Why should we grant this variance?
Well, our only thing is that we're trying to increase sales. It will help us, it will help the city. It's something that is done around the nation, the same way, the four-sided walls. There's the rendering, I think it's an attractive rendering. We were not happy with the color blocks that were on there. It had no purpose for us. And maybe we should have done this before building, yes, but, now this is something that we're interested in doing. It's,
All right, anybody have any other questions for? No? I need a motion to close the public hearing.
That's what I move.
I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, gentlemen, based on that, what are we gonna do? It would seem obvious to me that we're looking at a request of 28% when the ordinance calls for 5. I can't think of any criteria that really proves this to be detrimental. So I don't know what you want to do.
Well, I would be inclined to approve it myself. I mean, I think that the advertisement, we don't want a mall that's shut down either. And if this improves sales and maybe it's a marketing tool for all the vendors that are there, and you may still have empty spaces there that need to be filled at the same time. So, I mean, my guess, if it's something that is done in other cities and I do believe we have the authority to grant this type of variance, they're not erecting any kind of signage themselves, as far as I can see.
It's painted.
Painted on,
It's painted on the wall, so.
it's all black, all the lettering is black.
Okay.
and white.
Additionally, I don't understand the criteria for 5%, in the first place. I mean, was there a rationale behind it, or?
Regulation of signs is meant to, in general, prevent and visual clutter.
Right.
You
gotta have
know,
some
that's the
regulations.
general
Sure.
intention.
Sure, but like in this particular case, this building is facing Mexico, this is one of the markets that you're trying to attract to this particular establishment, right, at the same time?
70% of our customers.
So I would be,
Okay.
I would be inclined to.
Normally, I would say I would be against it, because I hate to go from 5 to 28%, which is outrageous in anything. But the fact of the matter is, it's painted already. You've already got black, or you had squares, colorful squares on it. So if they didn't put the signs, the names of the companies there, they could still get approval and paint it pink and blue, and we wouldn't have any option at it.
If it's a blank wall,
Well, it's a blank wall, it's a blank wall now.
yeah, but this is what they want
And
to do.
they're not putting any signs, they're not putting any billboards, they're not
Right.
erecting anything. So if they're gonna put ads on it, and it'll increase the sales.
I agree with that.
I'm not opposed to,
I move to approve.
I accept what you're saying, but at the same time, there are ordinances out there for a reason.
that's correct, that's correct.
And if we start accepting or granting variances based on just because somebody asked for it, then I don't think we're doing our due diligence.
No, that's what I said.
But you're gonna make a motion?
I make the motion
The
to
motion
approve.
was made to approve.
You have a motion to approve? Do I need to have a motion and a second to approve?
So
Any discussion?
Well, I wanted to say something that Mr. Norton was saying. Number one, obviously, everybody in Laredo, if we say no to this and they see us as affecting the ability of the outlet shops to do well or to advertise their products, I mean, we're gonna get jumped on bad,
That's
as
not a decision maker
Okay,
for me,
that's
though.
not a decision maker, but the other part of this is, that the walls face Mexico, they don't face any other street, no other thoroughfare other than Zaragoza, which runs along the river. As Mr. Norton said, we have to understand that these guys need a little help in what they're doing over there, and it's really not facing anything else other than Mexico, so.
But the only drawback to what you're saying is if we approve this,
Do we set the stage for,
you set the stage for them to come back and say, hey,
what about
we
the
have
north wall?
45,000 square feet on Zaragoza, and we're gonna do the same thing there. And we'll say, well, wait a second. Some of the people may object to it, some of the
Well,
businesses,
I'd asked the
so-
question of staff before, if when we approve items, if we can approve them
No,
conditionally.
you cannot.
And the answer was no. So, if I said, well, let's approve it, but make sure they can't do it on the north side, the west side, or the east side.
Well, that's what's gonna happen, and it's not gonna happen today or tomorrow, but that will happen. They're gonna come back and say, hey, now that we did this, we wanna do the other side.
I can understand like the issues of the black and white ordinances that are in place. I also feel that, like Mr. LeBeau was saying, to some degree, I don't know how much that degree is up here, it's about 23% more, okay, for your signage. Okay, and I think that's what Mr. Norton was also kind of had an issue with, but I also kind of feel like there are some economic issues. I'm not saying that's the only deciding factor, but I'm saying that that's something that I put into the basket to kind of let's
Yes,
test.
but I don't think it's this board's obligation to deal with economic issues. We deal with black and white, what are the ordinances? Yeah, go ahead.
If I may, the 5% was basically most on the street. Since you're driving down the street, you don't want to have this huge sign on a building. But the intent here is basically from the bridge, which is a very long distance, which that's really where they're trying to, the only issue we have is that we can't say yes.
No,
And the point is, the 5% was when you're driving down, you don't want to have this huge deal on a wall. So obviously, if you're driving down Water Street, you're not even gonna be able to look at those signs, because it's way up there.
No, you'll see it.
So, well, if you're
no,
driving a car, it's
and
really
I
hard to
think,
see it on that
the
street.
board here all agrees with your
Just
assessment.
wanted to say the 5%.
And we appreciate that, and I think the board all agrees with your assessment. But still, the underlying question is, if you approve one, are you opening the floodgates for the second one?
And like, and you're saying.
And since we cannot do something conditionally, the next person that's gonna come says, wait a minute, you did this one. Now, we can, in the back of our own minds, use the criteria that you just mentioned, that this is facing south. This, you cannot see. There's not enough of a private or public street or thoroughfare through there to where it's really gonna be affected. We could use that, but still the fact remains that it's an ordinance. We're accepting a variance. So, anyway, any other
Mr.
discussion?
Chairman, I just wanted to remind the board that the code does prescribe the criteria for granting variances for signs. And those were the very same ones that we mentioned in the previous case, where does it create a hardship and does it meet the three succeeding criteria? Would it allow for the property to be used for its highest and best use, as zoned? Would it create, would the granting of the variance be materially detrimental to, surrounding property owners? And does a hardship arise from, and you have them before you, just thought I would,
No,
In this case, it's applicable,
Remind
this
you.
would be the case.
You're not 1.5% off, you're 23% off.
that's correct.
And even
So
if,
my only objection to it will be because it's not 5%, we're gonna go to 10%. Okay, but it's 5% going to 28%, and in the future, they're gonna go to the other side and do the same exact thing as they did here.
And
Well,
the- and the
to
five-
that
stores.
The
point,
five
Mr. Norton?
percent would still apply to the northern and the east, west, all of that. Those
It all
rules would
applies,
apply.
but if you,
But
if
just,
you set a precedent by saying, they're gonna come and say, wait a second, you approved one side, how come you can't prove the other?
Well, I
Well,
think that to some
I
degree,
think
like.
based
what-
on that, is that whatever we approve today is just this.
Yes, sir.
If you were to come back for something else, in other words, we can look at it as being, okay, wait a minute, you are facing a busier street. So that does have a little weight here. So anyway, I need to call the
Wait a
question here.
second,
We
let me
can
ask
beat
one-
this
one
horse to death for.
So one thing, you can't say you can approve this side, but you can't, we're gonna stop you from approving the other side. You can't do that.
No, all
I
we're,
understand.
no, all we're approving is this right here.
I understand.
If he wants to do the other one, he's gonna have to come
Yeah,
back.
but it's gonna be approved. If we approve one, you're gonna approve the other. But my point is, if you want to regulate the size of the signs, you can do it easily by saying, okay, we'll give you 5%, or we'll give you 10% of the entire building. So he comes back and says, okay, the entire building is 90,000, I want 9,000 feet instead of 23. Fine, you want to put it all there, put it all there. But he can't come back again because he's already met the total requirement.
Let
We
me
can't
just say
condition.
that the north side, there's only 2 walls that are worth putting anything on.
That's why I said there
Because
wasn't
the
that much.
viewpoint, when you come in Santa Maria southbound, you only see
Can't see
the two end pieces.
No, I
And
understand.
those are like 50% because of all the telephone lines.
Yes.
That's why we didn't include the entire building. But you're right, I mean, that could happen 5 years from now. I don't know. I don't
But
think
the
it'll.
buildings
lines,
are
they
so,
change
on Zaragoza, the
directions.
buildings are so up close to the mall
Yes, those are
there, so I
not,
mean, like, obviously, the purpose of this is mostly for your potential
For
Mexican
Mexico.
clients, okay? I think there's a.
Mexican clients, on Saragossa Street, it's pretty much just a drop-off street. It's not
Right,
heavy traffic going
Right.
eastbound.
right.
So we have put a billboard on the caps on occasions, but we didn't include it in this because
The only question I have for city is, all right, so let's say this is approved. What's to say that we've approved that at 28%? What happens if you were to decide that you wanted to go to the other side of the building and paint? Are they authorized there because we've already granted this?
we're just addressing this one right now.
Huh?
They can apply,
They can, but,
they can apply, but it will be denied again.
yeah, it's a separate application.
Yeah, that's correct.
Because, so what we're dealing with right now is what is in front of us right here. Okay. All right, I need to call the question here. I think there's been a motion
Second.
and a second to accept the
8%.
variance as stated, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We've already gone through questions. All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Let the record reflect there was opposition. I think, what was it again? You were in
I voted
favor,
for.
favor, you were favor,
3,
favor?
4, 5.
Favor.
Okay. All right, motion carries. All right, sir, got it.
Thank you very
much. Having no further business, right? Am I correct?
sir.
Fernando?
No, that's it.
All right, having no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.